Kia ora from New Zealand. I'm in New Zealand because it's not a country that often comes to mind when people think about food. In ways, this small island nation has literally sat in the shadow of its neighbors. And it's so far off from everywhere else that maps often push it to the very edge of the world. But I also came to New Zealand because it looks like this. And the land here isn't just beautiful. The water and soil are deeply embedded into the cuisine of this country. Literally. New Zealand happens to be the last major landmass settled by humans, as late as the 1200s. And it was the people of Polynesia who landed here to eventually develop their own distinct culture and language. Now they're known as the Maori. For 400 years, the Maori cultivated this land, associating beautiful landscapes with vivid legends. But of course, we all know where this story goes. In the 1700s, strangers from the opposite side of the globe began to show up on the shores of these islands. And with them, they brought false treaties and business deals to dominate this land over the Maori. We've seen this story all over the world, but what's happening in New Zealand is kind of different and inspiring. So I'm in the middle of Auckland right now, and I'm noticing many signs that are now in both English and Maori. There's a growing resurgence of this once suppressed culture, and I don't know many places where Indigenous people are making themselves as visible and prevalent as in New Zealand, or as the Maori call it, Aotearoa. And the rediscovery of this culture, of course, includes its food. But despite these two cultures being polar opposites, the food of New Zealand has become a merging of both traditions and tenets. So I want to see what that looks like, because not only unique dishes, but context and history is what makes this cuisine stand out. It's June here in Auckland, which means it's winter down here because the seasons are switched in the southern hemisphere. I'm actually just beginning to realize that this is the first time I've ever been south of the equator. That's pretty cool. And also what's really cool is right now it's Matariki season, which is basically the Maori New Year. And to celebrate it, they have all of these neon signs celebrating Maori artwork across the city. But I'm here to see how these people and their culture make New Zealand's cuisine so unique. And that's what I'm gonna start doing tomorrow. Alright, so we're going to a Maori-owned cafe called Blue Rose. They're supposed to be pretty popular in town for their Hangi and Boil-Up pies. Never had Hangi, never had Boil-Up. This is only our second day in New Zealand, so yeah, very excited to give it a try and see what it's gonna be like. Okay, so this is a Boil-Up pie. Pies are incredibly popular in New Zealand and Australia as well. Let's just see what a mix of Maori and Western food tastes like. Oh wow, look at that. Wow. Wow, okay, that is amazing. It's super juicy, the meat is super tender. There's a lot of like spices layered in the pie, in the vegetables and the meat. And the crust is really good too. I mean, that's a secret to a good pie, a good crust, I think. This dish is one of the best symbols of how Maori and Western food have collided in the country. Meat pies are a major staple in New Zealand, brought over by European cultures. And this one in particular is stuffed with Boil-Up, a major staple dish in Maori cuisine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What is Boil-Up, or Hangi for that matter? And how did we get this mix of Maori and Western food? So I want to understand Maori culture a bit better. Like, what was it like to come from these tropical beach islands to these temperate mountainous ones? I wanted to meet with someone who could explain the culture and the history of the Maori people better than I ever could. So I came here to this town of Rotorua. It's a town with several different Maori villages, and it's also in the middle of like this thermal hotspot, so there's like steam coming out from all over the place here.
That's too dangerous to hot. That's about 80 to 90 degrees Celsius. So if anybody touch that, you'll get scalded. So you've got to hang it up in the air just to let the heat drop down a little bit.
This is Whakarewarewa, a geothermal spot that was once one of the Maori's strongest fortress towns. It's a place where the Maori have lived for centuries, taking advantage of the geothermal activity here for cooking.
So we have two methods of cooking in the rāhui. We have the ngafa steam box or the Māori microwave and the geothermal hot water pool.
The staff here were incredibly kind, showing me around their town and how they used these hot springs and underground heating for their food.
So I'm putting all our corn and our cabbage into these muslins, and then we're going to be dropping them into our parikohori water for a good 5 minutes.
So it cooks really fast.
Real quick. Like with shrimp, you just have to dunk them and then they're cooked.
Just immediately.
Like dunk and then yeah.
Do most of the families who live here, do they still use this to cook, or is this more for like kind of the tourists?
No, yeah, a lot of families still do. They always come and cook their eggs here. They just boil eggs in there, some noodles.
But then came the main event. They started collecting hangi from the earth ovens, which at this point had been cooking underground for about a few hours. And they invited me to try their hangi, which honestly was the dish I was most excited to try on this trip. We were also joined by China the dog, which was pretty cool, and she was a very good dog, of course. But I also wanted to understand the Maori people and their culture better, so I did have some questions.
All Māori originated from Hawaii. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, so that's the homeland before we got to New Zealand, and Hawaii is unknown now.
Were they looking for land?
Voyaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty much they were just looking for land.
Oh, okay.
So everyone was leaving Hawaii, and so like how Tonga got found, Samoa and all that, they found their islands, and then we found our island.
The islands of New Zealand are so far off from the rest of the world that its ecosystem was isolated for about 80 million years. In fact, it wasn't settled by humans until 700 or 800 years ago, making it the last major landmass civilization reached. The people who arrived here on the tip of the North Island came from an ancestral homeland called Hawaii. This island, or chain of islands, was in fact the homeland for many people around Polynesia. And from these islands, the Maori brought edible plants and food into this untouched land. Though unlike their homeland, New Zealand's climate was significantly colder, forcing the first settlers here to adapt their plants and diet to the new environment. These people were already great farmers, so they didn't have a problem when it came to growing or cultivating wild plants on this island. But when it came to meat, the story was a little bit different. New Zealand has no native mammals except for bats. Most of the island is instead populated by a unique set of birds that don't exist anywhere else. So when it came to meat, the ancestors of the Maori people hunted them extensively, especially this giant bird called a moa, which was hunted to extinction. When it came to cooking meat, the Maori brought over a tradition from their homeland, which was cooking food inside pits dug into the earth. This is hangi.
Just manuka and salt. It's pretty much all in it. It has all the flavors that it needs.
Yeah, I keep seeing manuka, like manuka honey, manuka wood. What is manuka?
Oh, it's like this part.
Oh.
It's the strand that we cook the meat with. It's best to get the ones with the flowers. But yeah, it cooks the meat really good.
Can you explain like what hangi is? Like what makes something hangi?
So, it's pretty much steamed cooked. And back in our days, that was how most Māoris cooked, was in the steam. And it's just like all the meats and vegetables from the land, like that they could use, they just put it all into steam.
While the dish looks overwhelming on the surface, the flavors are incredibly soft and smoky. Hangi was something I immediately fell in love with, as it carried this earthy tanginess which came from being steamed underground. Also cooked in the hangi was steamed pudding, something that Maori people love. The steamed pudding has similar elements to sponge cake, while carrying that signature hangi flavor. All in all, hangi is an amazing cooking technique that brings out a flavor I haven't found anywhere else. But Maori food doesn't end here. I'm back in Auckland to try another tradition of Maori cuisine, opposite of hangi, Boil-Up. So I had Boil-Up earlier in a meat pie, but I haven't had Boil-Up on its own yet. So I'm very curious to see what the difference is like and just try Boil-Up in a different place. It's another staple of Maori food. These days, it's mainly a soup made from pork bones, which came from European settlers, since pigs aren't native to New Zealand. But the dish itself dates back before Europe's arrival, utilizing kumara and whatever meat was available. These days, as it now takes advantage of European influence, this dish is a symbol of Maori resilience and adaptability to outside cultures. Wow, the smell, the herbs, it just attacks your senses immediately. I'm not even sure where to begin. I'm just gonna bite this off. It's gonna look messy, but whatever. Okay, that's good. That's really nice. I'm not really sure what this is. It might be a native vegetable or root. It's like mochi. Oh, sweet potatoes, so good here. Wow. One really cool thing about Auckland, by the way, is that there's 40 or something volcanoes. This is another volcano, and they just decided to put an obelisk on top of it. It's really cool. You can just look out at the landscape of Auckland and then just kind of spot these sort of jutted, extinct volcanoes all across the city. Okay, so I think the next chapter of New Zealand and Maori history is probably easy to guess. Outside of this isolated archipelago, the world was starting to change fast. A continent of empires began taking whatever lands across the world they could grab, sometimes for resources and other times just to have it. There was an urge for discovery and reward, and that reached here when a Dutchman became the first European to spot these far-off islands. Though he never set foot on these islands, his discovery led the Dutch to call this place New Zealand. However, it was James Cook who came and landed here to claim it for Britain. Of course, the Maori were already living here, but infighting, diseases, and battles with the Europeans rendered them into a not-so-great position. So in self-preservation, Maori chiefs from all across this land gathered together to get Britain to sign the Treaty of Waitangi. This treaty would guarantee the Maori to their lands and let them be counted as British subjects. And this was good for Britain as well, as it was basically the Maori agreeing to British control here, keeping it away from the hands of the French. But of course Britain didn't keep their promise to the Maori, of course they took more and more land, and of course it's a controversial topic now. This generally founding document of New Zealand is tainted by false promises and still to this day creates a sort of awkward relationship between the people here. Alright, so I'm at where the Maori call the belly of the giant fish. This place is home to many Maori legends, but one of my favorite ones is where a young man named Maui caught a giant fish. But when it came to the surface, it actually happened to be the belly of a giant island now known as the North Island. This place is home to many other legends, where another one is basically all the mountains in this region were male except for one, and they were essentially fighting over each other for that one female mountain. These volcanoes would shoot rocks and lava at each other, creating the desolate landscape that we're in today. The same landscape that was used for Mordor and Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings. But of course, Maori culture doesn't end with European arrival. Instead, the culture has continued to evolve. The next iconic Maori dish is Rewena bread. It's a kind of bread I haven't personally seen anywhere else, using potato boiled and mashed with flour and sugar. The result is an almost Scandinavian-esque sourdough bread. Bread and its ingredients were brought over by Europeans to these islands. Remember, potatoes were isolated and native to the Americas, and once they were discovered by Europeans, the potatoes soon touched every corner of the globe, including here. To the Maori, potatoes were similar enough to the kumara and were actually easier to grow. And at some point, they merged potatoes with wheat to create this unique bread. And I had this bread in French toast form, which had a texture and consistency I've never seen with French toast before. No talk about New Zealand's cuisine is complete without including fish and chips. It's an unmistakable leftover of British colonial history here. But nowadays, all people of New Zealand are incredibly proud of their interpretation of this dish, through their use of native ingredients. So I came down to this shop here in Wellington, with my Kiwi friend Miller, to give it a try myself. So, unlike in the UK, where fish and chips is more of a generational tradition, fish and chips in New Zealand is focused more on locally sourced, fresh ingredients. So instead of cod, the fish here is either snapper or hoki. And fish and chips in New Zealand is supposed to be lighter and crispier than it is in the UK, but there's only one way to find out, so let's see. Oh wow, okay. Putting the fork into the fish, it breaks apart much more easily than I've ever seen in the UK. Oh, that's like eating into a cloud. Oh, that's good. New Zealand's fish and chips is one of many examples of how dishes here cherish fresh and naturally sourced ingredients. And I think it's a nuanced appreciation that the Maori have come to develop here, because their initial arrival disrupted this delicate ecosystem. So their respect to the sanctity of these islands' natural environment has passed down to this modern country, which is something you can easily taste in its cuisine.
We mainly ate natural foods from the forests, from the lakes, from the rivers and the seas. So for us to eat that kind of food, it's like a treat. It's like a big treat. But to be honest, no, we go between. Introduce modern food and we can go back to natural, traditional food too.
New Zealand is not often looked at for its food, but I genuinely think it's a great destination for it. The US, Canada, Australia, and many other places have very similar histories when it comes to big outside empires coming in to conquer indigenous peoples. But here, the Maori have made themselves very visible, and their cuisine easily identifiable. And you can see how it's inspired the cuisine here in many very pronounced ways.
I think from my point of view, Māoris are very, very proud. Proud to be Māori, proud to show our culture. And like, everyone loves showing off cultures. And I think, everyone here, they love to just show it, especially to new people. New people is like the best way to get our culture thing, because we're such a small country, but we are quite known worldwide.
It's hard to not fall in love with the beauty of this place and really want to respect and appreciate what this land and the sea around it has to offer. I think people should start talking more about New Zealand's cuisine because they're missing out.